Oh, hi, Jeannie.
Hi, can you hear
Uh,
me?
yes, it says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, weird. It's
And
because it's a webinar. Make co-host. Yes. Does
oh,
that work?
there you go.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, Nadim is asking, is my link the same as the moderators? It's the panelist, right? Richard is on.
Let me see.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard. Let me
Hey,
make you a
how's it
co-host
going?
too.
Thanks.
So
Uh,
from my understanding, I haven't really used webinar feature for Zoom myself much before, but from what I understand, it kind of just makes it so that like we that have this link can decide if the listeners can speak or share their mic so that we can moderate better.
Mhm.
Which I will mostly leave to you all, but if you need anything, you can message me in the chat.
Okay. What are you all thinking? Should we do a more traditional Zoom or do the webinar style where like not everyone's on the screen and it's kind of just you can just focus on the speakers, I guess.
yeah, I think the webinar is just easier sometimes. If you have the regular chat, people are muting, unmuting, and we figured
Yeah.
it's easier because this way you can have the Q&A box for the questions, right? Is that where the questions are going to go,
Mhm.
Jeannie?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, Zaid is saying that he needs William and Mary credentials to log in.
Oh, okay. Nope, that's okay. I can get that to him. One moment.
I seems to have been deactivated.
Mm.
It's because I gave him my moderator link.
Oh, okay.
So I'll have Val resend that to him.
Okay. Hi, Nadim.
Hi, how are you?
Let's see.
I
Doing
can't
well. How are
start
you?
I can't start my video.
I
Ooh.
just changed it.
Oh,
You should be able to now.
okay. Okay, there we go.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's such a man background.
Hi.
isn't it? Yeah, like
I love
con
it.
the concrete walls.
Very concrete walls.
I was like, should I wear a blazer? Should I not wear a blazer? What do you
It's
guys think?
beautiful. And he got the AC unit behind him right there.
I know I'm like, how much do I show? I mean, I got some interesting
You
posters
need
there.
your head
Figured
in the middle of the screen. So you need to raise the screen up a little bit. Yep, this is perfect. Yeah,
okay,
It looks good.
yeah. So
awesome.
we're just waiting on Zaid. Nadim,
I'm
do you
getting
want
that
to
link
try
sent.
sharing your screen? Because I think you're the
Yeah,
only one that's going to need to share. So practice sharing your screen. Jeannie, if you can give him access to share the screen.
You should be able to. Let me know if you click and it says you can't.
I always forget where to do that. Oh, there we go. Share screen. Okay, where was it? So I switched to Keynote just because PowerPoint is no longer as user-friendly as it used to be, I guess. There we go.
Yay.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. Excellent. So you all can see this without me needing, without my screen being just the presentation. That's awesome. Did you see me shrink it? No. It's still just the presentation, right?
It's showing the side note
We have the
slides.
slides too.
Oh, then maybe let me, is that what that is? No, not close window. Oh, I need to go into
Oh
presentation.
yeah.
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 Oh,
Here we go.
Perfect.
but
Perfect.
then my screen is just showing the presentation and I'd like my notes up. That's What's always,
There might be an option to share, rather than sharing screen, you share the window for, oh, I guess you still have to do the presentation.
but the thing I've been doing is just enlarging the like the keynote or the PowerPoint, and it takes up the
Yeah.
whole screen. And for in the shared screen, and then I just have my notes.
Ultimately, I
now
feel like that should work too, if you want to just do it that way. I think it should be okay.
what do you
What do you all
guys?
think?
Do
Oh,
you
how
have
about this?
2 monitors by chance?
I do, and that didn't help. Like it, like but on PowerPoint, so maybe Keynote. Because what it would do is it would like start an automatic PowerPoint software that would change both monitors. Should I try to bring the monitor and try it on Keynote? Let me try that. 1 second.
All right, while you try that, let's give a brief run of show. So, we will begin, let's give a few minutes for as people are coming in. We can tell them to go ahead and, post, comment in the chat, whether they're students, alum, or guests, and what their interest in the topic is, or, at least the first just 2 to 3 minutes until we get a good number. Jeannie, do we have an estimate number of how many people registered?
Yesterday when I checked, it was 20. Let me look right now. I've been at a conference today, so let me just pull that up to see if we got any other additions.
So we can start out with that, and then Richard, you start by welcoming everybody, introducing APIM. How many minutes do you think you need for that?
Not much, maybe 2-3 minutes
2-3
tops.
minutes.
I'll
Perfect.
just really quick synopsis of APIM. Thank people for coming and then hand it off.
Okay, perfect. And then I will introduce myself. I will do the housekeeping and let them know like how, that Nadim will speak for about 30 minutes or so. And then we will open it up to discussions. I will let them know to post the questions in the comment box, because sometimes people post it in the chat too. And it gets a little hard to find where people are posting the questions, but Zaid is going to be our monitor in the back to see if we're catching all of the questions being asked. And then I'll introduce the topic briefly, put it in the context of where we're at in Arab American Heritage Month, introduce our esteemed guest, a little anecdote about how he was in college. I'm just kidding. And then
Totally.
I'll hand it off to you. So mine would be about 4 minutes when I timed myself speaking fast. So I'll try to speak a little slower. So Nadim, you will have about 30 minutes or so. And then it kind of depends on how the questions are coming in. It'd be nice to ask them to get the questions rolling in as you're speaking, so that by the time you finish, we would have like a good number of questions to discuss. And then we'll pick questions as much as we can. If we run out of questions and nobody's participating, which is, I doubt it, I have some questions. I'm sure Zaid, Richard, if you have any questions to also add. And then Nadim, if by any chance we literally run out of things to talk about, which highly doubt it, please do speak about your experience as, Palestinian Arab American on campus as well. We can always, because we will have some students rolling in. And then at like 12:58, 59, we'll wrap it up. I'll just close it off by thanking everybody, telling them to stay in contact with APIM events and thank the organizers.
Sure.
Anything else you think we're missing?
I just wanted to let you know that we are at 31 registrants now, which is fantastic.
Perfect.
It's great.
And I hope that I just want to say from personally, I really appreciate all the work that you all have put in. I'm so excited to listen to you speak today, and I hope that you'll feel comfortable, you know, sharing your experiences and truth. I'm not here to moderate any of that.
Okay.
Oh, exciting. Well, we
you.
thank you for all of this effort you put into it and for arranging all of this. It's a learning experience together, so it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Honestly, this is like I've been doing a lot of these book talks, but none have felt so significant. This is William Mary.
Welcome
Like,
home,
I
Nadim.
grew up there. Super, super formative years. Okay, I think I figured it out. Is my screen still shared?
It is, but we can see your notes.
Okay,
So-
that's good because
Okay.
that means they're in there. You know, academics shouldn't have to do this stuff. This is terrible. I'm so bad at this. Okay, so if I did this, you can just see the first slide with the book cover, right?
Yes, but we see no, we still see the presenter notes.
I don't know.
Even now?
Hanan is here.
So I don't know if this helps, but with, and you may have tried this, but when you go to share screen and it pops up like the 4 different windows, if you open like your presentation, like if you open 2 of the same presentation, one you could put on one screen and the other one you could just scroll through your notes. That's a little clunky, but it should let you share only the screen that your presentation is on, and then you can just have on the other screen your.
Okay. So currently have them separated. Okay, so let me move my speaker notes here.
Hi, Zaid.
Hey, Jeannie, thank you for
Hey,
helping me.
Zaid.
I had some technical difficulties, but I'm thanks to you, we were able to troubleshoot quickly, which is good. We did the prep, I suppose.
I'm glad. Also, help me. I just said Zaid, and I'm realizing I might be pronouncing it wrong.
You actually got it the first time around, and which is rare. So
Okay.
thank you. But thanks for checking. One thing for the Q&A versus the questions, what I'll do, Banan, is if people type questions in the chat, I will in the chat just say thank you so much for your question. If you don't mind typing that in the Q&A, I will start in this session. I'll start moving people over so it's all consolidated. And then obviously vice versa, if people are writing stuff in the Q&A, I'll say feel free to chat, but let's try to keep the Q&A. So basically isolated, so by the end you have what you need to start moderating the question and answer. So I'll do that in real time. Also, I'm going to be on a simultaneous call, which I have to do. So I'm going to put my screen off, but I'm going to be here. I'm just going to be in the background.
But Zaid, can you put you're going to be able to put the link for the book somewhere like halfway through, be like, here's the link to the book. And like before he finishes speaking, to just like either link his LinkedIn account or, how to stay in touch with Nadim.
Yeah, I'll use the Stanford Press link, which I know Nadim has. I looked at it, it has to buy the book and everything. So it also has a summary, which has introduction. And then I'll also put the LinkedIn. Okay.
Perfect. All right, we're about to begin.
Oh, so, hold on. So it still shows the notes?
Yes.
I tried what you said, Jeannie. Switch displays. How about now?
That's perfect.
This is
Oh my
Does that mean
gosh.
you can't see?
No, all it did was switch. So now my notes are on the big screen and the slides are on the little one, but that means I'll be looking at the big screen. So maybe it's fine if I'm not staring at the camera, is it?
One last question as we're starting to get some attendees in here. Did somebody click there was like an option that said switch from test run or something like that? It may have just switched automatically at noon on its own, so.
I'm hoping, because we have people joining in. Hi, everyone. I don't know if can you guys hear us? Can you see us? We started, right? Okay. Hanan says I'm good. We're good.
Awesome.
All right. Okay. This is so exciting. Welcome back, Nadim. Welcome to William and Mary.
Thank you.
Welcome home. How long
Thanks.
has it been since you've been back to Williamsburg?
Oh, wow. Over 10 years, over 15 years, probably. Yeah. 20 years, maybe.
We'll give you a couple more years. You got to come back for your 20th year.
Definitely. That's right. 2007 will be 20.
It's coming up really fast. Be here before you know it.
Right.
Guess we'll continue to just give folks a couple more minutes to get on.
We got Harper, we got Tina and Sasha and Hanan and Ali. Welcome, everyone.
I am changing the chat from hosts and panelists to everyone for a little while so that our guests can share a little bit about themselves if they want to and what they're looking forward to in this presentation.
It'd be great for the folks who are on the call to feel free to drop a comment if you're a student, alum, any questions or comments you might have about the upcoming presentation here.
And if you know Nadim personally, we got to see how much nepotism is happening here. Professor Nadim Bawalsa. Hi, Tina. Yes, lots of familiar, friendly faces. I do remember you, class of 05.
I can't see the notes for some, or the chat box for some reason. Look.
All right, welcome Franklin, Harper. We also have members from the APIM board and Jen. All right, we'll take a few more minutes, just a minute or so, Richard, and then we'll go ahead and begin.
Sounds good. Great, and for all those who are just coming into the room now, feel free to drop into the chat if you're a student, alum, your class year. Would love to learn more about who is attending.
Welcome Harper, member of our APIM Alumni Advisory Board from Northern Virginia. Welcome Hanan, class of 04 from joining us from New Jersey.
All right, I think maybe we should go ahead and get things started. I'm going to kick us off really quick. First off, just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm Richard Luong, class of 2008. I have the honor of working alongside so many amazing colleagues as a member and co-chair of the William and Mary APIM Alumni Advisory Board. The APIM Advisory Board is a group of alumni who self-identify as Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and/or Southwest Asian. We have such an incredibly diverse set of folks who bring forward their life experiences, and it's really our mission to honor and explore the vast diversity within our community, and to bridge alumni and cultivating a real community for alum who identify as APIM, and ensure that our faces and our voices are a core component of William and Mary's present and future. For those of you who are interested in learning more about us, I'm sure we'll give some more plugs at the end of the program, but you can find us through the William and Mary website, social media, or our contact, the fantastic Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, Ginny, who's also here. Feel free to reach out through any of those channels. We'll include some links and information in the chat. We'd love to connect with you. Today's program is a part of National Arab American Heritage Month. I'd like to extend my thanks and appreciation to Banan and Zaid, who have been really tremendous in leading the way to ensure we were able to have this program today. And with that, I will turn it over to Banan, who will introduce our program and our amazing speaker, Nadim.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you for leading and co-chairing our APIM board and kicking us off on our first, really, our official public events that we're having. My name is Banan Melkawi. I'm a William & Mary alum class of 2005. I am a member of the APIM Advisory Board, and I am honored to be moderating this very special event. And thank you all for joining us to mark Arab American Heritage Month. A special welcome to our alumni, to our students and guests. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Our guest speaker, Dr. Nadim Bawalsa, will speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then we will open the discussion up for Q&A. We encourage you to participate and share your thoughts and post questions. This discussion promises to be an enriching exploration of the Palestinian narrative. So please post your questions in the Q&A box to ensure that we don't miss it in the chat. We couldn't think of a more timely and relevant topic to mark Arab American Heritage Month. And I say mark and not celebrate, as this time is profoundly perplexing to ponder our diasporic experience, our narrative, our cultural consciousness as Arab Americans. And instead of celebrating our rich contributions as part of the fabric of the American story, we as Arab Americans find ourselves time and again needing to assert, correct, defend, or even refute stereotypes and propagandas that marginalize us and our Arab identities, but also experiences that are shared with other diverse groups in America as well. Chief of these stories is the story of Palestine. It is a story of existence, of perseverance, of resurrection, and indeed a story of homeland and belonging. In this context, today's talk will explore an angle so rarely considered in the Palestinian story. When we invite a historian to speak about Palestine, where should they begin? What pivotal year or moment or event marks a good starting point for any conversation about Palestine? Nadim's book, Transnational Palestine, navigates this intricate tapestry of the Palestinian identity. It sheds light on the Palestinian struggle for self-determination, even before the framework of the conflict as we know it today, vis-a-vis the state of Israel. It talks about tens of thousands of Palestinians who migrated to the Americas in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, established themselves amid early signs of dehumanization that began by negating their very existence. They began by resisting imperial colonialism ahead of the settler colonialism that followed, and the first articulation of Palestinian right of return that emerged well before 1948. What fascinates me about this pivotal work is that we have grown so accustomed to hearing the words Palestinian refugees or displaced Palestinians, words that connote forced movement by expulsion or circumstance, as is the case in 48 or 67, or the ongoing case in 2024 and all of the years in between. Yet this book speaks of Palestinian migrants, waves of immigration that turned into exile, and the early manifestation of statelessness. Nadim himself has a story, his family has a story, and this story is woven into this fabric of this Palestinian thobe, so beautifully and yet so painfully intricate as the art of Palestinian embroidery called tatriz. Nadim Bawalsa is a historian of modern Palestine and author of Transnational Palestine, Migration and the Right of Return Before 1948, published by Stanford University Press, winning several prestigious book awards in 2023. He currently serves as the associate editor for the Journal of Palestine Studies and resides in Amman, Jordan. Nadim earned a PhD in Middle East Studies and Islamic Studies from New York University, an MA in Arab Studies from Georgetown, and of course, where else would this scholarly rigor get chiseled but at the College of William and Mary, where he earned a BA in History and Psychology in 2007. Now, I introduce him today as Dr. Nadim Bawalsa, but to us, he's Nadim, the life of the party, the prime Arab American, the Dubke line dancer at the Arabic house parties, and amid the lack of Arabic restaurants in Williamsburg and all of Hampton Roads at the time, he was our companion in making falafel parties at our humble college apartments. That's how we remember Nadim, and it is an absolute honor to introduce Dr. Nadim Bawalsa. And so without further ado, it is my honor to welcome you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Banan. That was actually a beautiful description of not just my time at William Mary, but the contribution of the book. So I think we're good here, Banan. So what I'll start by doing is making sure technically everything is going well. So just sharing the screen because there were some issues with this earlier, but hopefully those were resolved. So if I were to do this, do you currently see just the first slide, the book cover? Excellent. Unfortunately, the notes are on another screen, so my eyes will be turned there, but I hope you're looking at the slides throughout the presentation anyway. Good afternoon and good evening from Amman. Also, Eid Mubarak to all who are celebrating. Well, it's not really a year to celebrate, but it is the end of a very introspective and meditative and difficult month for many Muslims who've been fasting and observing. So tonight concludes the month of Ramadan. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here today speaking to the William Mary community, to my community. I only wish I could be there in person to do so, sitting under the weeping willow by the sunken gardens, or having coffee with you all at the daily grind. Hope it's still there. I'd like to thank William Mary's Asian Pacific Islander Middle Eastern APIM Alumni Board for your interest in hosting this event, and a special thanks to Banan Malkawi and Zaid Khouri for reaching out to me to speak about my book and for making this event possible. Transnational Palestine traces the journeys of the pioneering Palestinians who first started boarding ships bound for the Americas around a century and a half ago in pursuit of political stability and economic opportunity. It traces their migration and settlement patterns and the radical transformations that impacted their lives following Britain's occupation of Palestine in December 1917 and the subsequent termination of the Ottoman Empire in 1918. Which had ruled Palestine as a southern province of Greater Syria for 400 years. Simply put, these migrants left their homes in Palestine as Ottoman subjects, and they became stateless Palestinian nationals banned from permanent return to Palestine following the establishment of the British Mandate in 1923. Their descendants, though nationals of other states, remain in exile with internationally recognized rights to Palestinian nationality to this day. In the next 30 minutes or so, I will outline how British colonial forces orchestrated this exile starting in the early 1920s and how thousands of Palestinian migrants responded to it. As I hope will be made clear by the end of the presentation, the practice of denying, or the policy rather, of denying or disregarding Palestinian rights, among them being the right of return to their lands as Palestinians, a right protected by international law as early as 1924, started well before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, as did the transnational solidarity movement among Palestinians and their allies to rectify various injustices committed against Palestinians everywhere. I'll end with some reflections on the implications of the book for our approaches to Palestinian history, as well as to the Palestinian condition today. Mass migration to the Americas from Palestine began as it did elsewhere in the Mediterranean. Oh, I'm sorry. This is going to be an issue. What I'm going to do is stop sharing, enlarge. Because my notes continue to disappear every time I switch slides for some reason, for some very unpleasant reason. I apologize for that. So we, as long as we are good to go, the slide currently should just be a picture of the boat. Okay. So migration to the Americas from Palestine began as it did elsewhere in the Mediterranean. It began with the invention of the steamship in the early 19th century. Coal proved particularly effective at getting these massive ships across oceans and port cities throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, like Beirut, Jaffa, Haifa, and Alexandria, quickly opened branches for French, Italian, Turkish, and other European boat companies. The offices of the French Messagerie Maritime boat, pictured here, were located just inside the Jaffa Gate of Jerusalem's Old City, a prime and central location in Jerusalem. In the first period of migration before the dismantlement of the Ottoman Empire, migrants from Ottoman Greater Syria, today comprising the nation states of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine, took several rather affordable routes westward aboard these ships. Why won't it let me go to the next slide? Sorry about this. I'm using Keynote, which I don't usually use, so I'm so sorry about this. What I'll do is switch back to the presentation I'm used to using on PowerPoint. I was telling the team earlier that they need to assign folks who know how to manage double screens and Microsoft and all these things for academics such as myself, who end up spending most of their time.
We don't mind seeing your notes, Nadim.
Well, no, it wasn't even that. It was removing the notes every time I was switching slides. So it was very strange. Okay. All right, so this should work. Microsoft. Okay. So now you see the, and I'll just enlarge it. There we go. All right, back to it. So they took several affordable routes westward aboard these ships. The most common route started in Jaffa or Beirut, then through France via Marseille, and then to one of several ports across the Eastern Atlantic seaboard, like New York, Veracruz, Mexico, Rio de Janeiro, or Buenos Aires. This journey took at least 3 weeks. More arduous journeys often lasted longer than a month. I'll read an account of a Palestinian from Bejala, a small town at the time, today almost a city, neighboring Bethlehem. He migrated to Chile in the 1910s. It took him 45 days, and the trip was anything but easy. We first went to Lebanon to take the boat from Beirut. We slept the night there. We boarded the boat and it went to Greece. There we took another ship. It was gigantic. It was an Italian ship. The first couple of days, we couldn't eat anything. We were all seasick. The first port we came to was Marseille. There we stayed about 5 days, then to Barcelona. After Spain, we arrived to Dakar. In Dakar, we stayed 1 more day, then on to Brazil. The boat stopped in Santos. We slept the night there. Then we went to Rio de Janeiro. From Rio de Janeiro, we continued to Buenos Aires. It took 5 days. That completed the 45-day trip, with stops included. But his journey did not end at Buenos Aires. He was on his way to Santiago de Chile, which was no small feat either. Migrants arriving in Buenos Aires would link up with Arabic-speaking middlemen who would supply them with a credit line to cross the continent by train and get to Chile via Mendoza, the Argentinian border town. There's just one problem. They needed to cross the Andes Mountains, the spine of South America and the world's longest continental mountain range. Crossing the Andes, even in warmer months, is challenging and requires a certain amount of expertise. So Palestinian migrants hired indigenous Mapuche guides to get them across the treacherous terrain on mules to the nearest train station on the Chilean side. But the journey ended with something quite spectacular. What Palestinians found on the other side of the Andes was a landscape and climate that looked and smelled almost exactly like home. The western slopes of the lower Andes bear a striking resemblance to the rolling hills and dry, temperate climate of Palestine. It is little wonder that following an exhausting journey across oceans, continents, and mountain ranges, these migrants chose Chile as their final resting stop. So who were these Palestinian migrants who happened to find Palestine west of the Andes? Largely, they were Christians from the towns of Bethlehem, Bejala, and Beit Zahur, all in the governorate of Bethlehem, south of Jerusalem, but also from Ramallah, Jerusalem itself, Nazareth, and elsewhere in historic Palestine. The pattern of migration was more or less as follows. The first to immigrate were almost always young men who were fleeing conscription in the Ottoman army or desperately trying to make a living. These youth would initially spend a couple of years in the diaspora, or the mahjar in Arabic, saving enough money to return with remittances and bring along parents, siblings, and hopefully a wife to join them on their next voyage westward. Whether fleeing conscription, economic crisis, or Ottoman suppression, thousands of Palestinians boarded ships alongside Syrians, Lebanese, Egyptians, Greeks, Italians, and so on, and other migrants from the Mediterranean basin, and headed to the New World. Importantly, these migrants regularly returned to Palestine with bags of money in a tradition of bi-directional travel that became a mainstay of the Palestinian economy by the time of the British Mandate. In fact, much of modern Bethlehem was built by Palestinian families from Bethlehem, returning regularly with loads of riches that were then invested in infrastructure in Bethlehem. An exception to this pattern of migration that I described, one which shows just how rich and layered these narratives were, is the story of Katrina Saade, pictured here in the center of the photo. The modest Greek Orthodox Saade family from Bethlehem first migrated to Kiev in 1906, while it was part of the Russian Empire. Struggling to feed his growing family, Abdullah Saade, Katrina's father, seated on the right, wearing a suit, was drawn to the Russian Empire due to then Tsar Nicholas II's interest in expanding Orthodox commercial networks. Abdullah, like most Palestinian migrants, sold Holy Land goods in Kiev, including olive wood, crucifixes, rosaries, mother of pearl, you name it. Anything that you associate with the Holy Land was being sold by Palestinian peddlers. Katrina, 6 at the time of her family's migration to Kiev, grew up there. But in 1914, with economic calamity across the Russian Empire and with the Bolshevik Revolution brewing, Abdullah fled danger in Kiev and returned to home to Bethlehem with his family. But that year also saw the Ottomans' entry into World War I against the Allied forces. An already exhausted economy was now put under wartime siege, and Abdullah couldn't feed all of his children. He therefore sent his 14-year-old daughter, Katrina, with her sister and her brother-in-law to Saltillo, Mexico, to marry Jamil Kabandi, also a Palestinian who had settled in Mexico a decade earlier, and Latinized his name to Emilio. So Katrina, who by then spoke a combination of broken Russian and Arabic, was sent halfway across the world to marry a man she didn't know in a Spanish-speaking country. Certainly, this was better than hunger in Palestine. Katrina arrived in Saltillo, married Jamil, or Emilio, and began a life as part of the town's growing Palestinian community, or Jalia. Katrina had 2 children with Jamil, but Jamil was killed in a train accident in 1916 during the Mexican Revolution, and one of the children died of the flu that year as well. By 1921, at the age of 21, widowed Katrina took her surviving daughter Julia and traveled to South San Francisco in California, where her sister and brother-in-law had settled a few years prior. There, Katrina had her second marriage to a Palestinian from Ramallah, Suleiman Farhat, with whom she had 2 more children, one of whom is pictured here, sitting on his father's lap. The remainder of Katrina's story is just absolutely fascinating. She fled debt during the US Great Depression, briefly returned to her in-laws in Ramallah in Palestine. There was the family scandal that drove her to run away from Ramallah with her children, only 2 of them, not the 3, and returned to the US by boat from Haifa. And finally, she divorced Suleiman in 1936, which is certainly the first known transnational Palestinian divorce. Katrina then lived the rest of her life in the US. But I asked her granddaughter, Kathy Kenny, who shared with me her grandmother's letters from the 1920s and 30s, how her grandmother identified. You know, she was born in Palestine. She spent the first 6 years of her life there, and then in Kiev. And then during her adolescence, and early adulthood, she only spent mere months in Palestine. Did she identify as a Palestinian in California? Did she say she was an Arab? Did she identify as Mexican, Russian? Evidently, Katrina preferred to identify as Syrian if it came to it. So one of the main questions I explore in transnational Palestine is how Palestinian migrants self-identified during this time period before the colonial boundaries that divided Greater Syria were drawn. The legal and political categories which we use today to designate nationalities in our region did not exist in their current form just 1 century ago. Historic Greater Syria included Lebanon and Palestine as its western and southern regions, respectively, and what Jordan is today was simply southern Syria. This is to say that while the terms Lebanon and Palestine existed before the Europeans carved the region into mandates that turned into states, they were not yet used to differentiate nationally between the people of Ottoman Greater Syria. Rather, Palestinian and Lebanese as terms signified geographic, environmental, cultural, political, and even linguistic variations among Syrian communities. As Katrina's story and the sources examined in the book show, people from these regions considered themselves to be first and foremost Syrians, sometimes, though not always, Arabs, and they were all officially Ottoman subjects until 1918. As indicated in their travel documents. In fact, their Ottoman travel documents are why migrants from Greater Syria were initially registered as Turcos, or Turks, upon arrival at Latin American ports. Even though it's a misnomer, Arabs are not Turks, after all, and even though it turned into a racial slur, the term Turco today still carries great significance for the Middle Eastern, or descendants of the first Middle Eastern migrants to Latin America. So while it's important to affirm the historical unity and subsequent enforced fragmentation of Greater Syria, there were nonetheless territorial demarcations put in place by the Ottomans. These porous boundaries were mostly used for taxation purposes and for census records, which is actually why we're able to ascertain the numbers of migrants from different parts of the empire. Based on Ottoman censuses conducted around the turn of the 20th century, an estimated 1.8 million people resided in Greater Syria at the turn of the century. Between 1860 and 1920, an estimated 600,000 persons immigrated from the region to both North and South America. As for Ottoman southern Syria, known as Palestine, it consisted of the sanjaks of Akka and Nablus, within the state, or vilaye in Ottoman Turkish, of Beirut, as well as the autonomous district known as the Mutasarrifat of Jerusalem, which included Jerusalem, Jaffa, Bethlehem, Hebron, Be'er Saba or Beersheba, and Gaza. These are marked, the bottom two yellow and the orange provinces on the map on the right. The population of the two sanjaks and the Mutasarrifat was approximately 600,000 in 1900, and migrants from these areas amounted to around 10,000 by the start of World War I in 1914, and an estimated 40,000 by 1936. But the British military occupation of Palestine in December 1917 marked the end of Ottoman rule and the transition to a new geopolitical configuration of European mandates. A configuration agreed upon in secret by British and French forces 1 year prior in the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. The plan was to sever Greater Syria and Iraq and to end at the end of the war to reflect the interests of European forces, leaving us with roughly the borders we know today. In 1921, the League of Nations ratified the French and British mandates, which were meant to be temporary, guiding the peoples of the region to self-determination. This short-sighted mission was muddled by the most infamous of British promises, the Balfour Declaration of November 1917, in which Britain promised the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland to see to the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. How Britain would do this while honoring its promise to the Palestinians for self-determination as part of an Arab kingdom, it simply did not. The Balfour Declaration featured in the text of the British Mandate for Palestine, which was drafted in 1920, right after the military occupation of Palestinian ended, and it transitioned to an administrative administration or administrative rule over Palestine, which Britain did unilaterally in contravention of international law at the time. Article 7 of the mandate stipulated that the government of Palestine, which was the British-run government of Palestine, would enact a nationality law through which it would facilitate the naturalization as British Palestinian subjects of the nearly 400,000 Jewish immigrants who would settle Palestine over the course of Britain's 30-year rule in Palestine. The nationality law used to naturalize these settlers, known as the Palestinian Citizenship Order in Council, was promulgated in 1925 and features prominently in the book. Through it, tens of thousands of Palestinian citizenship certificates were issued, and most to European Jews. I'll put this slide up, but I'll also read some of these figures to give you a sense for the sheer imbalance in British citizenship policy in Palestine. Between 1925 and 1929, of a total of 20,168 applications for Palestinian citizenship, 15,551 were approved. Non-Jewish naturalization accounted for only 1% of this total. On March 8, 1937, British colonial authorities reported that more than 28,000 Jews had been naturalized in Palestine between 1931 and 36, and out of a total of 4,941 certificates of citizenship granted in 1936, 4,847 were for Jews. Meanwhile, by 1937, about 9,000 applications for citizenship had been submitted by Palestinians residing in the Americas, and of those, not more than 100 were accepted. This continued for the duration of Britain's occupation of Palestine until 1948. As for why British authorities regularly denied Palestinian migrants their applications for citizenship, here are some of the reasons that emerged from the sources. Insufficient proof of intention to remain permanently in Palestine, despite Palestinian migrants saying the opposite. Insufficient proof of connection to Palestine, despite linguistic, racial, property, family connections, birth in Palestine, absence for a period longer than 12 years, which was in fact an arbitrary number that they kept changing and they finally decided on 12, or the migrant's patent undesirability, which was not made clear in any of the documents. Finally, these migrants, quote, cannot be held to have had direct connection with Palestine except under the Ottoman regime, or to have any legitimate claim to be considered Palestinians or to British protection. They are therefore not and never have been Palestinians. Meanwhile, Jews entered Palestine virtually without check of any kind. As John Shuckburgh, head of the Middle East Department at the Colonial Office in London, put it quite bluntly in May 1925. British forces were fully aware of their biased policy. They were also fully aware that they were contravening international law, to which they were signatories. In 1923, the Allied forces and their defeated Turkish counterparts signed the Treaty of Lausanne, which was officially ratified a year later in August 1924. The treaty delineated the sovereign borders of the Turkish Republic in exchange for Turkish authorities relinquishing all claims to territories they once held in the Arab world. This extended to any claims they held over residents of these territories, including those residing abroad. So all these former Ottoman subjects were stripped of Ottoman nationality and came under the trusteeship or the responsibility of mandate authorities. Regarding residents or migrants of these territories residing abroad, Article 34 of the Treaty of Lausanne gave them the right to, quote, opt for the nationality of the territory of which they are natives, if they belong by race to the majority of the population of that territory. This was based on the 3 legal criteria laid out in the treaty for qualifying for nationality. Nationality through birth on the land, blood lineage, or long-term residence. The treaty therefore officially promulgated Palestinian nationality globally and protected Palestinians' rights to it from wherever they were in the world. This is precisely why thousands of Palestinian migrants applied for Palestinian nationality. They qualified for it through birth or blood. But this is where the governance of Palestine falls outside of the law, or fell outside of the law at the time, a precedent set by the British after World War I and that lasts to this day. As a territory promised to the Zionists, the League of Nations in Geneva, which was responsible for managing the mandates, left the administration of Palestine entirely to the discretion of the British Crown, a crown which had clear interests in following through with Balfour's promise. International law, including the Treaty of Lausanne, didn't apply to Palestine as long as it conflicted with British or Zionist interests. The latter half of the book explores how Palestinians in the diaspora responded to this injustice. In dozens of newspapers and hundreds of petitions addressed to British, Palestinian, and European authorities in London, Jerusalem, Geneva, and elsewhere, Palestinians and their allies across the Americas spoke up and objected to Britain's exclusionary policy. They repeatedly accused Britain of contravening international law, as laid out in the Treaty of Lausanne, the Treaty of Sèvres, and the Versailles Peace Treaty, and they worked with Palestinians in Palestine to make sure British authorities in Jerusalem were aware of their abuse of power. As an example, in February 1927, members of the Centro Social Palestino of Monterrey, Mexico, addressed this petition to Musa Kadhim al-Husseini, the leader of the Palestinian Arab Executive in Jerusalem, asking for his help in securing their rights to Palestinian citizenship. Husseini, who's one of the sort of big shot nationalists at the time, joined a group of Palestinians and marched to the offices of the government of Palestine in Jerusalem with a petition of their own, as well as this petition translated and copied, listing their compatriots' grievances and demanding redress. I want to give you a sense for the language these Palestinians used in their petitions. They had clearly done their homework. They had read up on the legal jargon, including the Treaty of Lausanne and Article 34, and they had read quite a lot on the relationship between the League of Nations and the mandates in terms of authority and sovereignty and policy and so on. These petitions were first written in Arabic or Spanish, but then translated into English upon delivery to the nearest British consular office, whether in Mexico City, Santiago, or elsewhere. It's very interesting that the consulates would receive these petitions and willingly translate them. And in internal communications between, let's say, the consulate office in Mexico City and London, they would often say, while attaching including the petition, please read the following petition, which has very reasonable and important and necessary claims that we believe London needs to consider. London would subsequently ignore the petition. So this was, as we're seeing today, this was very much at the top deciding ultimately, despite many in the middle, many of these sort of colonial authorities in the middle agreeing with the petitioners, London and Jerusalem decided otherwise. So I'll read excerpts from one petition, which I find represents almost all of them that I find. It was written on February 23rd, 1927, by Ibrahim Masso and BJ Qawas of the Centro Social Palestino in Monterrey, Mexico. To His Excellency, Field Marshal Lord Plumer, High Commissioner, Government of Palestine, Jerusalem. Sir, we, the undersigned native-born Palestinians, resident of the cities of Monterrey, Saltillo, Chihuahua, and San Pedro, Republic of Mexico, do hereby most respectfully solicit your aid in the solution of a problem, which for us is most serious. We've always maintained contact with our native land and continue to cultivate those ties of blood, language, tradition, and all other ethnic and social associations which go to make up a native land. We believe we are entitled to consider ourselves as Palestinians. We were born in that territory, have always wished to be Palestinians, and we are sure if as a last resort it shall become necessary to carry our petition before the League of Nations, that august body will grant us the right to consider ourselves nationals of Palestine. We believe, sir, with all due respect, that the decision of the Palestine government as expressed by you does not in any way, agree with the spirit of the treaties, nor the clearly manifested intention of the League of Nations to foster, encourage, and revive the small nations which before the war were subject to others. Signed on behalf of the members of the Palestinian colonies by the Centro Social Palestino. This is the first of 5 pages of over 300 signatures. Note the letterhead, which says the Hijos de Palestino, or the Sons of Palestine Committee in Saltillo, Mexico. The first line in Arabic indicates that this committee collected these signatures and sent them to the Centro Social Palestino in Monterrey in order to add the names of Palestinians in Saltillo to the Monterrey petition. Palestinians across Mexico's northern corridor were very much connected and were very much politically engaged. Over the course of mandate rule in the interwar period, more than 3,000 appeals and petitions reached the League of Nations in Geneva. By reached, I mean they arrived, but that doesn't mean that they were considered. The majority at 43.3% concerned Palestine. Palestinians across the Americas also protested British mandate policies in newspapers. The National Library in Santiago de Chile, home today to the largest Palestinian community outside the world, estimated at 500,000, houses more than 10 journals and periodicals published by the migrant community in the early 20th century. The rich Arabic and Spanish sources say a great deal about the daily lives of these early migrants from Greater Syria, and they show that following the installments of the mandates, Palestinians and their Syrian and Lebanese counterparts remained abreast of developments back home, informing one another of the threat of Zionism. They were also fully aware of the Balfour Declaration and of Britain's duplicitous plans in Palestine, including the denial of citizenship to Palestinian migrants in contravention of the Treaty of Lausanne. In issue after issue, for years, newspaper editors warned their readers of the dangers of European imperialism, of the importance of safeguarding the rights of Palestinians to their nationality, and how to go about doing so. In 1927, they even urged Palestinian readers to join the Committee for the Defense of the National Rights of Palestinians. Chile's Arabic press indicate a shift in self and group identification among Palestinian migrants across the Americas at this time. While they still identified as Syrians or Arabs, what British mandate authorities did by denying them Palestinian citizenship was to cement among them the sense that they were and would always be Palestinians. For example, on April 23rd, 1927, a Palestinian migrant in Trujillo, Honduras, said the following in a petition he addressed to the League of Nations after his application for citizenship was denied, along with several others. "We are Palestinians, born, bred, and reared, and no power on earth can sever our claims and rights as Palestinians." Transnational Palestine thus argues that collective Palestinian political consciousness developed transnationally in the early 20th century, and that it was inextricably linked to Britain continually denying Palestinian migrants their rights to be considered Palestinians. This identification as Palestinian and with Palestine is quite palpable in Chile to this day. One of the country's main football clubs is named the Club Deportivo Palestino, formed in 1920 by Palestinian migrants. Chile is also home to large and frequent anti-Israeli occupation marches and demonstrations. I'll show you some of the ones I attended in 2014 when I was there. Of course, the ones organized since October 7th are much larger and more frequent. There are also many examples of the imprint of Palestinians and other Arabic-speaking migrants on the social and urban fabric of Chile. I'll conclude with a few thoughts about the implications of this book for today. What Transnational Palestine indicates is that the historical study of Palestine and the Palestinians need not be limited to geographic Palestine or to British and Israeli archives. Our documents, our historical record, our voices are stored in archives and personal collections across the world, and they house stories that need to be told. Palestine is absolutely everywhere. Connected to this is the critical idea that Palestine need not be studied in relation to Israel, nor in spite of Israel. Palestine and the Palestinians did not start in 1948, nor did our stories. In fact, Palestine and its diverse peoples were always part of regional and transnational developments. That they haven't been written into many historical narratives so far is ultimately a deliberate act of colonial erasure. The book also makes clear that the British mandate for Palestine was designed with fundamental inequities, and that at no point throughout the occupation of Palestine did British authorities seek to rectify this. In fact, the success of the mandate was arguably predicated on these inequities. Connected to this is the blaring truth that whether 100 years ago or today, Palestine continues to be an exception when it comes to the application of international law, and that the mandate period set that international precedent. By the time they left Palestine in 1948, British mandate authorities had denied 40,000 Palestinians their legal rights to their nationality, enshrined in international legal treaties. The subsequent colonizers of Palestine, the Zionists, have simply been continuing a practice of exiling Palestinians and keeping them in exile since they formed their state in 1948. And as we know too well, accountability international law continues to magically be overlooked when it comes to the Israeli regime's violations of a litany of international laws, including, most recently, the crime of genocide. Yet we Palestinians never imagined we would see the day where the people of the world, and irrespective of their governments, would stand in such palpable solidarity with us in our struggle for justice. What this means for the ongoing pursuit of Palestinian liberation in colonized Palestine and across the world is that we must first and foremost realize the extent of our exile, the extent of our numbers, our resources, our experiences, our capabilities, and the immense span of all those who stand with us in solidarity. We must continue to mobilize around this. In fact, our exile is so expansive, so old, and so ongoing, we actually have no idea how many Palestinians out there are. This can no longer be the case. Our ancestors in Mexico, Chile, Honduras, and beyond taught us that we should use our numbers, our geographic fragmentation, and the nobleness of our cause to our advantage. The very fact that our struggle to belong to Palestine from exile began in 1925, not 1948, and that it includes millions of descendants of Palestinians scattered around the world should compel us to forge expansive networks of Palestinians to collectively strategize how to safeguard our connections to the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Whether this starts with establishing departments of Palestinian diaspora or exile studies in universities, or with reviving the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, to represent us in global forums, or with creating forums across the world for us to literally come together, register our numbers, and share our stories. However we choose to do it, our diaspora is much more significant than we know, and it's my contention through this book that we need to activate it. I believe today, more than ever, Palestine and those who stand in solidarity with us deserve this leadership. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Nadim Bawalsa. This truly, you were right. This merits 1 hour is not enough for this, for sure. I wish I would have had the chance to read the book before this. It is so detailed. It is so interestingly outrageous and grievous that the contraventions of international law date back to a centuries old, and that the denial of existence of Palestinians is not a contemporary phenomenon, but rather dates back to centuries old problem. One of the interesting things that brought up as you were talking, the example of Katrina, for example, considering themselves Syrians, Arabs, or Ottomans, brings up the contemporary issue that Arab Americans in the United States are facing today when it comes to our numbers, our demographics, and our inclusion as a racial category in the census, for example, and the contemporary issue that is happening with the Office of Management and Budget to include a new category for Middle East and North Africa as dating back to this early era in the late 19th, early 20th century, these early migrants who couldn't figure out how to identify themselves, and therefore they were identified as closest to Mediterranean and therefore white. And therefore we are now considered white, despite the fact that we do not share in the privilege of being considered white. We have 3 questions. We'll begin with a question from Harper. The introduction, proliferation of DNA-based genealogy or ancestry tools has had major impacts on people's understanding of their family's history. How has this influenced today's understanding of the Palestinian diaspora? What narratives has this reaffirmed and or challenged? And finally, given that the borders and names of the lands have shifted over time, and they tend to map ethnic heritages into geographies, are these genealogy services potential allies in affirming Palestinian connection to the land? So interesting, because my sister just had her 23andMe, and we traced our ancestry right to where we belong. So very interesting question.
Wow. It is fascinating. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know, sort of as a historian and in no way a scientist, to what extent these kinds of tests can confirm or assist in any of these things. What I do know is that, well, from my understanding, these DNA-based tests are based on existing pools of folks who have taken the tests. And from what I know, very few Palestinians, well, I don't know if any Palestinians in Palestine have taken the test. So the idea is that there is not a representative sample of existing DNA tests of Palestinians in Palestine to draw that connection to the land. Is that how these things work? I know that my late cousin did take the test and found that he has roots, sort of, it also depends how big the circle is on the map when they show it, but it was kind of a larger, it covered greater Syria. And then it had
It
some
actually pinpoints it now, where when my
Does it?
sister took it, because we're from like northern Palestine, northern Jordan. So it pinpoints it based on how many people are taking the test. So it would be interesting to see these kind of genealogy tests that could affirm this lineage and this heritage. And especially as these early Palestinians were trying to assert their connection to the land as early as 100 years ago.
I will add one thing is that it is an uncomfortable topic for Palestinians. I'm sure that the idea of our whiteness, because it has assisted us in many ways, or we have sought in historically, and some of the sources point to this in the book, to try to be more white. But this is to not be so that whatever host country we were living in would not limit or cap our migration numbers, so that they would continue to allow migrants to come. So they would actually, in the newspapers, call on each other to behave more like Europeans and not like Africans or Asians, so that we can continue to have the flow of our relatives coming. So this has more to do with American governments, North and South America, limiting or sort of having immigration quotas depending on location or origin point. So there was a concerted effort to try to push to be registered as white for decades.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another question from Sasha, if you remember Sasha. I appreciate Jack Shaheen's documentary, Real Bad Arabs, how Hollywood vilifies a people as a teaching tool to explain the manufacture of anti-Arab sentiment to unaware Western audience. Is there a go-to film you recommend specifically for this topic or for Palestinian diaspora in general? Or are you aware of any in production, film, book, or so forth?
I actually would just say Real Bad Arabs. I mean, I even used to teach it. It's so critical. What I did see the other day on social media is that one of the Hadids is starting a new Palestinian production company, right?
Yes.
A film production company.
Their older sister.
Their older sister. So stay tuned. I mean, there's tons of Palestinian films, and I think there's a different. I mean, there's so many, but they're now being listed in different places, social media and different websites, I'm sure. There may not be documentaries beyond Real Bad Arabs that address this topic specifically, but I think any film at this point that shows Palestine in any way is critical. So I would encourage you to look into Palestine.
Nadim, we early on titled the talk as the international law and the concept of Palestinian, early Palestinian migrations. Would you speak a little bit about the implications of international law as it's understood from the historical perspective that you are presenting it, and how you're viewing it as a Palestinian Arab American today, and how we're understanding the applicability of international humanitarian law, UN security resolutions, and how you can build that connection with the centuries old contravention of international law.
Right. I mean, well, maybe I'm still not so hopeful about it, but until this genocide, and until literally yesterday with Honduras filing a new claim against Israel or against Germany, excuse me, and as a complicit regime in the ongoing genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, and until sort of South Africa took the case to the ICJ, until all these other governments have been severing ties and diplomatic ties and filing legal claims against. I believe that something has budged a little bit, because I don't think in 20th century or 20th and 21st century international law has there been this concerted effort on a global scale to bring one regime of power that is clearly contravening international law and committing genocide and many other atrocities. There has not been this concerted effort to do so. So we have yet to see what this all produces, right? So I'm not saying that up until this, I had thought, sort of our liberation struggle cannot be fought or discussed in terms of rights anymore. We all know Palestinians have a right to return. We all know our rights to nationality, well, maybe not nationality, but to return, to own, to inherit, to live on our land, to belong to the land. This is all enshrined in international law. The fact that it's been denied, the fact that the majority of us are still registered as refugees, right? This has just made me sort of jaded in a way that there's just no way out of this. But I really think that something is shifting, unless that's just my way of saying, well, something's got to come of this genocide.
Absolutely.
Right. So I really hope that there actually is a shift, and that you know, if it's not through international law, then it's increasingly through isolating these regimes of power that abuse power and commit these crimes through boycotts, through sanctions, through divestments that are increasing. I mean, you're seeing people literally now trying to, or not now, only the last 6 months, blocking ports from sending shipments to Israel. I mean, this is, you know, and in what domain of international law is this covered? It's not, right? So the power of boycott, the power of the masses, the power of using the legal jargon and using, you know, all of this can be brought together with the street level, with the popular level. And I think that's what we're seeing at this point. So I'm not willing to throw out international law just yet, inshallah.
Absolutely. And being mindful of everyone's time, we'll take one last question from an anonymous attendee. Can we shed a light on the way that the resistance and the people inside Gaza shifted the tactics and technology that led to introduce the cause in a way that grabbed people's attention, which is what you were, the world's attention, as you were saying, versus the legacy approach that failed to deliver the reality of that struggle on the inside? That's a very good question.
If I'm understanding the question, I think the answer is just the digital revolution, right? And the difference is the proliferation of information and image and video today. I don't think we would be where we are today in terms of the international solidarity movement had it not been for the digital revolution and for social media more specifically. Petitions are also funneled through very specific legal and political channels, right? They're delivered from the consulate to London, from London to Geneva. Activists aren't reading them. Allies aren't building, you know, folks in London, your average person who believes in social justice 100 years ago isn't reading these petitions and learning about folks in Latin America who are being denied these rights, right? That's, I think, the most fundamental shift. And that's, I don't think, something that regimes of power saw coming.
Absolutely. I think that also kind of works to answer that last question. Do you see a pattern of history of empires to wipe out brown and black people? It's that kind of understanding of that pattern of empire, right? To be mindful of everyone's time, I believe we can go on for 2 hours and not give this topic its merit in conversation and discussion. I really want to thank you, Dr. Nadim Bawalsa, for this very enlightening and illuminating discussion on your prolific book. We congratulate you. We're very, very proud of you as a William & Mary alum, as our Nadim, and for answering the questions. Thank you to all our participants today for attending and engaging in this session on this prolific book, Transnational Palestine. We put the link to the book from Stanford University Press. Please reach out to Nadim on LinkedIn. We also included information, his contact information. Reach out to him. Nadim, are you on the One Network, the William & Mary One Network? We need to get you on. Okay, we need to get you on that so you can get more in touch with, it's a One Network that brings in the alums and the students and the university community together. Lastly, I would like to give special thanks to the APIM Advisory Board. Some of our members are here today, and to Zaid Khouri for also helping logistically in setting this up. Our wonderful staff liaison, Jeannie, and the team at the William & Mary Alumni Association and University Advancement. We hope you stay in touch and keep a lookout for future events for APIM. Thank you so much. And Nadim, we really hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And sorry for the tech issues. It was
It was perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a great rest of the day.